Welcome to Fueling Conversations, a sport nutrition education network podcast with Dr. James Fleming. In today's episode, we're joined by Bryony Johnson, a performance chef with an incredible career cooking for elite athletes, including Roger Federer and the British sailing team, to name a few. Bryony shares her unique journey into sports nutrition, highlighting the importance of balancing nutritional science with the joy of eating. She discusses the disconnect she's seen between traditional nutritional advice and the real-life preferences of athletes, advocating for more of a personalised and intuitive approach to fueling performance. We also dive into the challenges of sourcing foods in different locations, adapting to dietary trends, and creating a positive, welcoming environment around meals. Bryony emphasises how food influences not just physical performance, but also mood, culture, and team dynamics, making it a key part of an athlete's success. This conversation is a must listen for anyone interested in the power of food. Let's get started. Hi guys, welcome to another Sports Nutrition Education Network podcast. Today we're lucky to be joined by Bryony Johnson, who is a pro performance chef. So that's her company, her brand at the minute. And as always, we will get started by essentially just asking Bryony to tell us a little bit about herself. And I think this is a really interesting one and a really important one, where there's always an assumption that sports nutritionists or nutritionists are good cooks, and I will attest to not that. And when I met Bryony several years ago on a course, and then I heard some cool stuff that she had about some of her background, particularly with regards to tennis, I always clung on to her, and since then we've been lucky enough to have her as part of our program. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Bryony.
Thanks for having me.
Do you mind giving us a bit of a background into kind of your career to date, really?
Yeah, so I started off in yachting as head chef on like a super yacht. So think below deck, if anybody's familiar with that, but a classier version. And I was on a sailing yacht, which is very different to motor yachts. So we did a lot of racing and regattas, and I had up to kind of 35 international race crew that would fly in, and we'd be in lovely places like St. Bart's, and catering for being out on the water when you're in the sun all day, and just keeping everybody well fed, hydrated. So that was kind of where I started in yachting. So yeah, it was for kind of the rich, and I don't know if famous is the word, but just the quality of the food, because people, I think the world of kind of like CEOs and people that are high achieving in business is very similar to the people who are achieving in kind of the sporting world as well. It was the mindset of, they wanted to nourish their body in the best way that they could. And then I was in a transitional period, and I got to work I flew out to Dubai and got to work with Roger Federer, which was amazing. So I was with him for, I think it was just over a week during a tournament out in Dubai. So again, like my role was to source all the food, deal with a lot of different dietary requirements. And this was quite a while ago, and I don't think sports nutrition was anywhere to the level that it is now, and considered to the level that it is now. And I saw a real, I don't know if niche is the word, I think it's disconnect with what people thought they should be eating, what they actually enjoyed, and how to merge the two. And then I went on to work for people like Sir Ben Ainsley during the America's Cup. And again, he'd been working with a nutritionist, and there was just a massive disconnect with food. He didn't seem inspired by it. It was definitely fuel. And it made me really sad. It made me really sad that they weren't, like, I would get asked things like, is this healthy? And I'm like, yeah, it's really healthy. Just because something tastes good doesn't mean it's not healthy for you, and it doesn't have to be really boring. And if you don't like that, you might, I think the course that we did the other day, James, there was a guy who he loved, his mince on toast or brown rice with broccoli and chicken, and that's what he loved. And but there's other people who don't. And then I kind of finished my career in yachting, and I did a sports nutrition course at Twickenham University at St Mary's, which I absolutely loved because I wanted to kind of understand more of the science behind sports nutrition so that I could actually apply that to help support the people that I was working with. And then I went on to, I'm cooking for the British Sailing Olympic team. So I'm at the Olympics
amazing.
this year with them, yeah, which is really exciting. And we did a trial Olympics last year. So just to understand how the logistics of how everything works, we take over a whole kind of like hotel. And it's a very varied dietary requirements because you've got males and females, some people that are trying to bulk up, so actually add on to their weight, some people who want to sustain. Don't think we've got anybody who's in that loss kind of like category who's trying to lose weight when we get to this stage. And then at the beginning of this year I worked with Anthony Joshua, so heavyweight. I've never done anything to do with boxing before. And that was
I remember you saying the biggest guy you've ever seen.
oh, he's huge. He's huge. And the nicest guy and the most humble. And just the team was so positive. And yeah, I think what really helped me in that kind of scenario was working on yachts. You're traveling to so many different countries and you get to really understand different or work with a variety of different foods and cultures. And like I personally love Caribbean foods, but I think it really helped me in that scenario as well, because he wanted a lot of variety. And it was everybody kind of the first question that they ask is, oh, but he eats so much food. And I'm like, yes and no, because when you're training twice a day, if you have such, like I think he's burning up to 3,000 calories per training session. If you eat 3,000 calories, in how can I put this? In food that's not been not in a smoothie base, so it's easy to digest, that is going to be a hell of a lot of food and you're not going to want to train afterwards. So it's being able to get something that's very calorie dense in a way, in a smoothie base, that he is going to be able to want to do his training session, if that is going to aid his training session rather than make him feel sluggish and his body's spending all this energy on actually digesting the food rather than being able to train. So yeah, that's my background.
This is where we're going to have to be very careful with just within 40 minutes because there's so many questions obviously that fly off the back. I guess the first one, because we'll delve into some of those individual bits as we go through, but how did you start getting into being a chef? Like what were what point in your education space or your age and then what did you do to become a chef? And then why specifically the transition from the yachts and the super wealthy to sport?
So I got into a chef, and this is going to sound really random, but I loved school. I didn't love necessarily, I'm highly dyslexic and my brain just works in a very different way to, I think, an academic format. And food to me, I saw how it brought people together, and it just made me really happy. And I also think that I was definitely brought up in a culture where, the you shrunk yourself down rather than, looking at your body to make it stronger. And I think like looking back now, that really saddens me because I think food is such a joyful thing. And there's so, I mean, another company, I actually don't know if I can say that. I worked and did a lot of recipe development for a company that is very in the media now for glucose monitoring. And I did a lot of their recipe development for that app. And I think for me, like food was a way of expressing myself. I wanted to learn about culture. I wanted to learn about people. And I saw it as a way to help me travel. And I got into yachting because I was actually running away from a boyfriend. I think it's quite extreme measures, but
It works.
yeah, I didn't want to get back together, and I was like, well, I think we'll
Where
just,
can I go?
yeah.
Caribbean.
Anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere.
Everywhere.
I don't think I was ready to fly the nest of beautiful Yorkshire. And yeah, I jumped onto a boat. I'd done lots of cookery courses, but I actually went to a chef's academy and qualified properly, and it was a place down in Devon called Ashburton, and they do a different range of courses from kind of, I think, 4 days to 4 weeks to the actual chef's academy. And I chose that one because I liked the philosophy of the place and the ethos, sorry, where everything was sourced within a 30-mile radius. And we went to the farms where everything was produced. And you saw the care and attention that these farmers were putting into, whether it was chickens or whatever crops they were growing. And so that when that produce was put in front of you, you did not mess it up, basically. And I loved that. Like, I really, really loved that. And yeah, and then I spent kind of 15 years in yachting, and I started off on a smaller boat, which was kind of 56 foot. And I think I was 21 when I did my first Atlantic crossing, and I did it the wrong way around. So I was going from west to east, which is a much rougher passage because a lot of low pressures form. And I remember being so seasick and leaving the Caribbean and arriving in the Azores, a shell of a woman. And I don't think I've ever thrown up so much in my life. And I crawled off the boat, and I was like, I'm not getting back on that thing, but I did. And then arrived in the sunny UK. And I think the reason, so I kind of went more into like really, I'd had a taste of the sporting world because it was what I was doing in yachting anyway, without me kind of knowing, when we were doing regattas and dealing with race crew who are professional race crew that kind of fly all over the world. And the people that are dealing with jet lag, you've got people flying in from, Australia or wherever it may be. And food was such an important part. It's something that every single person will ask you what they're having for lunch and what's for dinner. Like, those are the two main questions of the day. And it can change a whole mood. So even if you have not done so well in a race, or something's broken, or whatever it may be, there's not been a great dynamic that day, if there's something that they're really looking forward to, food can like really, really change the dynamics of that day. So I think it was during COVID, I actually went to St. Mary's, and I think we did actually go into the university. Yeah, we did. And it was kind of, I think it was the diploma, and it was nutrition and disease, and then the sports nutrition. And the reason why I went into it is because I'm really active anyway. In yachting, you do, you take advantage of your area, so you can, start your day with paddle boarding or going for a swim in the sea or hike,
Amazing.
and then end it, kite surfing or, whatever it may be. Everybody is really, really, really active. And because when you're on a trip with a guest, it's a really intense environment, especially for the chef, because you're not really getting off.
Yeah.
So that's your kind of like world that you're in for however long they're on board for, if it's 10 days, 2 weeks. And exercise for me, whether you wake up in the morning and start your day with like Pilates or however it may be, it got me into such a positive space. And I think during lockdown, again, that was just one thing where I found it transformative. And also food as well. And I wanted to merge the two because I knew how much it had helped me. And then when I'd worked for people like Ben Ainsley and like Roger Federer, and I just saw how I think the nutrition advice that was given at that time was just very, I think, like you said, James, it wasn't, people expect you to be a chef or expect you to kind of come up with these ideas of what to do or what they can do to support them. And when you're dealing with different nationalities, people with different dietary requirements, I think to be able to put that into context, into a dish, was where I saw like a very disconnect of what was going on. And I'd come to the age of, God, I think, well, I'm about to turn 40 this year, Jesus. But I was 37, and I'd had an incredible career in yachting, but I'd also reached a ceiling where I didn't feel that I was learning so much anymore. I'd had such incredible experiences, and I was just ready for a new challenge. So I was moving back to the UK, and sometimes I question why I've done that when it's raining. But moved back here and set up Pro Performance. And not that it was easy to do, because I was setting up, like, no one knew me, where I had a reputation in yachting, but the skills that I had learned from being in yachting were very transferable. And from working with like high net worth or, billionaires, the way that they approach stuff, and it was the same mindset as, it was that same mindset of athletes or sports people. And so I think the knowledge was very transferable. And also I think that sports nutrition, when I moved back as well, I think it's on that upward curve where everything had been very much based in kind of strength and conditioning, and now people were seeing the benefits of, a diet and what that diet could do. So yeah, I don't know if that answered all the questions.
Yeah, I love it.
That's fascinating. I've got like a million questions. Probably taking it, just thinking about that kind of global aspect and traveling around, how do you approach kind of sourcing food and planning food when you don't necessarily know what's going to be available at the location, presumably? Like, I know it's slightly different if you say with Roger Federer, you're like, okay, I know where he's going to be, I can research, there's probably resources behind him that can help me do this. But like, how do you approach developing sort of an exciting menu when you're like, I know what's there?
I know this is going to sound really shocking, but like, even for the Olympics last year, the Trial Olympics, I'll do like maybe a rough guide to the first week. But again, that is subject to change, just because when I was out there, everybody kind of really drilled into me you know, keep it plain, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, I'll keep it plain. And I personally, you know, can find that really, really boring. And even if I did a plain quinoa or a plain pasta, you know, just with some olive oil and salt and pepper and kept it really, really plain, those were the two things that weren't going.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, they don't just want plain. And then it was don't do spicy food, don't do spicy food. And I think people, it was when there was the big debrief afterwards, it was the one thing that, I mean, out of all the different departments, the athletes were asked what contributed the most to their performance, and it was catering. So, and the other thing that came out of that when we were doing the debrief, and that what's come up as well, kind of going into this year, was they don't want it as plain. They want more exciting things. And I think sourcing those ingredients, you have to just, you go to the markets, you know, you research what is out there, and you're very adaptable. And I think because I've been doing it for so long, it's really hard to explain, because it comes so naturally to me, where you can just be plonked somewhere. You look at what days the markets are on, or what's in the local supermarkets, or whatever it may be, wherever you're going to source your food from. And just looking at the best of that produce which is in season, and how you can apply that to a dish. And also something that really affects what I'm going to cook is again the mood of the athletes, of what's happening that day. Going into kind of the Olympics this year, I'll definitely have a look at who's performing, or, you know, who's got a race or whatever it may be, and make sure that if there's something that I know that they'll love, then I'll definitely make sure that they have that the night before, whether it's comforting, you know, it might be spag bol, you know, or macaroni cheese, just so that they feel not seen, but I think comforted is the right word. So they don't feel like they're eating something completely alien to them. But yeah, sourcing the food, I think, is the most exciting part for me, because I love, like, I will get up so early in the morning to make sure that I've got something really, really like, I just flew back from Bayona in Spain, because I was cooking for a different sailing team out there. And oh my gosh, just being in, like, the fresh fish, everything was, to me, it just, I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to cook for this. And I do really notice, like, they had one really bad day on the water where they had to do 2 restarts, where they should have come first, and they ended up basically coming last that day. And every single person that walks through that door, you know, I'm like, hi, how's your day been? And they're like, and then when they eat that night, you know, is when they do their debrief. It's when they analyze what's gone on that day. And if you're, another thing that I find really, really, really helpful when you're cooking for a group of people is to separate everything. So there's the carbs, there's the proteins, there's the, you know, veggies and salads, and also to make things, it can be the most simple thing in the whole world. Like, if you're just doing a tomato salad, but you've got some beautiful fresh basil and gorgeous extra virgin olive oil with just salt and pepper, you can make that look exciting and colorful, so that people are like, oh, what is that, you know? And everything is simple. Like, I don't do anything that is like, the meal that we cooked the other day at St. Mary's is such a simple meal, but it's, you know, it was full of so many vibrant colors, and without people knowing it, they've eaten something that is so nutritious, but it starts from a place of enjoyment.
What was it for the audience? What was it we made again? Just remind
We
me.
did a chipotle and honey chicken burrito bowl.
Oh, yum.
My
That
Yeah.
sounds
favorite day. It's
great.
my favorite day of the course. I get a professional chef to come and make me lunch. That's so
That sounds amazing.
it's so good.
Yeah.
Um, oh my gosh, I had a question. It's entirely gone. I started thinking about burrito bowls. It was completely gone. I
In
can't
terms of
remember what the question was. Oh no, I would say with the so obviously it like food is, you know, like you sort of kind of shown with the fashion you talk about it, it is more than fuel and it has an impact on performance beyond just what the macros and micronutrients, etc., are in there.
Yeah.
Um, do you overlay kind of what's there with strategies in terms of, like you said, for example, with this summer, you will have some people who are trying to gain weight even through the sort of the performance period, some people who are sustaining. Do you do things with like food placement? Say with those buffets, like, you know, it's been a heavy training day, the carbs come first because you want
Yeah.
them to load them up on their plate, and vice versa on a lighter training day, the veggies are put out first, and that kind of not tricks, you know,
subtle behavior change nudges.
yeah, the behavior change sort of elements within there as well. Does that kind of fall into what your sort of planning and scope within what
It
you do?
Yeah, it does. So kind of for the three athletes that are wanting to weight gain, like one strategy that we've kind of like put in place is that they can come into the kitchen in the morning to get, you know, a smoothie which has got bananas, peanut butter, you know, Greek
Yeah,
yogurt, all those kind of calorie dense food in, and I won't put something like that out for the mass at breakfast. That will be catered just towards them. So
yeah.
right from the get-go, they will have something that they know that they can come in, which is going to aid them in the goal that they're trying to achieve. With someone like AJ, again, the things that will go to training with him. So his meals aren't just breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's a whole kind of package put together for him to go to each training session with. And that will be boiled eggs. It'll be 3 different types of shakes, one that is calorie dense and two, sorry, that are more fruit based.
Mm,
And if I know that for someone like AJ, I suppose it's different because with a heavyweight, in the evening, everything has to be, again, it's very protein based, but also carb loading as well.
yeah,
So on a lunchtime, not that it won't be as rich in carb loads because there will be a carb there for him to have. But again, everything is set out, it is separated. So he has the choice. And again, with all the athletes, they have the choice because I think not by the time that I'm working with them, but the sports nutrition role in that is that they've been working with the sports nutritionists who are showing them what is going to help aid them so that when the food is put in front of them, you know, by that point, they're going to know what is going to aid them and what's going to fuel them
yeah,
in that situation. So I think that where we come to on that point is that you know, as sports nutritionist, you'll have implemented those strategies, and by working together, you know, we come up with a solution of, right, okay, these people are, I'm just using this as an example, but these people are on weight gain, how can we aid that? So yeah, by kind of not putting it out to the masses, because I think also it can do the adverse effect to the people who don't want to, you know, if I'm putting something out there and they're like, oh, that banana shake looks amazing. And then by the end of, you know, week 1, they're like, oh, I feel a bit
bit
heavy.
heavy. Yeah,
So I think it's understanding what each individual is trying to do, but
Yeah.
also when you are cooking for the masses and you can't be so personalized from a sports nutrition point of view, it's up to the sports nutritionist to make sure that the athlete understands how and why, so that when the food is put in front of them, they're like, okay, I know that this is gonna help me do this. So yeah, but like, because every discipline is so different and every discipline requires something else, I have to be able to put on many different hats, because when I've worked for, say, I was working with kind of a very high net worth individual, and they wanted to lose a substantial amount of weight, but in a healthy way. And they didn't want to yo-yo, and we wanted to implement very kind of structured, not structured, like good foundations, basically. And I always come from a point of view of like, I want you to enjoy this process, and I don't want it to seem as a diet, because not that I just don't agree with that. I think that's where, if you don't want it to just be for 12 weeks, you want to carry you want it to be a lifestyle instead of a diet. And his thing was to lose weight. And then I went from, like looking at food and how I could aid weight loss, but him still have the energy kind of, to be able to work out, go to the gym, play tennis, whatever it was. And also mentally, to not, be sat at a desk and be like, I am starving, and that's what he's actually thinking
That's all
about.
I can think of, but yeah.
And I went from that to, like doing the Olympics, and the hat that I had to put on for that was when one athlete was like, I'm trying to gain weight, and I was like, oh wow,
This is fun.
yeah, this is, and the different ways. I was like, okay, but how you do that in a healthy manner?
Yeah.
Because it'd be really easy to put on weight, but how do you do that in a way that's it's going to help them? Because that can change. I mean, we know so much more now about like gut microbiome and mood, and how the two are so connected. How do you do that so that they're not waking up and they actually want to engage with food? Because one kind of like athlete came up to me, and she was like, this is the first time in, I think it was like over a year, she was like, that I was actually looking forwards to food. She was like, because I've been trying to gain weight and I've just found it so difficult and so hard. And she's like, and she viewed it as food, and she wasn't looking forward to it. And she was just like, and now like I'm actually looking forward to food, and I can't wait to kind of like dig in. So I think it's, it's changing that mindset and understanding what that individual may need. I don't know if that's answered the question that you were asking.
No, it has. And actually, that makes me think as well, because obviously, like when you're say cooking for the sailing teams, etc., you're not going in to teach them, you are going in to provide them with the food. But have you noticed with situations like that, have you had feedback or people say like, just from experiencing this, I've now taken XYZ into my day to day as well?
Yeah, massively. And it makes me so happy. And they'll email me and be like, oh, can I have the recipe for such and
Oh,
such?
that's
And I'm like,
amazing.
yeah, of course. And again, it's putting it into a context where people feel the confidence and also the ability. Because another thing that I took from one of our sessions teaching at St. Mary's was it makes me laugh. So I thought, this is again me being very naive, was that everybody could just cook rice. Like it was just a standard thing that I thought was very basic. And I probably wasn't understanding or meeting people where they were at. with their food. And I mean, it was the funniest thing ever, because I was like, oh my God, people are actually setting rice on fire. This is
That was a nervy introduction to Bryony Johnson in our module.
I was like, wow.
James is no longer course lead. The MSc is no longer available. What's happened? Oh,
We've just burnt down the classroom. It's fine. And I was like, okay, so like, what did I learn from that is that, not everybody is at the same level, and something that might seem really simple to you is not to somebody else. So how do you, instead of them never cooking rice, how do you put it into a actionable kind of, how can they implement that in their diet where they feel comfortable? And because nowadays, you can walk into any supermarket and they'll do pre-cooked things like quinoa or brown rice or whatever it may be. And so this year I was like, aha, we are going to use that. And we're going to give them all pre-cooked rice. So for one, it's a massive time saver. And as well for like athletes, they, at the end of the day, especially if with Olympic athletes, especially, they haven't got the funds or the resources, to have a
Or the
private
mental capacity
yeah,
as well to cook themselves.
yeah. And it's honestly,
They're
it's the
knackered.
last thing I want to do when I
Yeah.
get home is cook for myself. And if my boyfriend has not cooked me something, then I'm not in the best of moods. But you just want something that is, you don't have to think about. It's not another thing that you have to cook, but know that, oh, Bryony cooked brown rice, and they can go to the supermarket, I've already bought packaged brown rice. It's one less thing that they have to cook. So yeah, like I do it, everything is really simple. Nothing I do is difficult, because it's not the food that you want to eat. Like, I don't get home and think, oh my God, I wish someone could do a
PJU, do we not need like a little PJU on the side?
a little yeah, a jus or a foam. I'd be like, no, get that off my plate. I want gravy. So I don't, I don't think that's what people want to eat on a day-to-day basis. It's not.
How do you think we bridge that? Because obviously there are more and more people being qualified performance nutritionists. The knowledge in this space is growing, the science is getting better, and we've got lots of people with great theoretical knowledge and ability to apply it to practice. But how do we bridge that gap with regards to cooking skills, where some sports, many sports, don't have the budget to have a performance chef at the moment? And if they do, there might be a switch where they've got a chef, but they don't have a nutritionist, and vice versa. So is there anything you can kind of share on that side?
Yeah, I think hopefully the course that we're going to create, James,
Keep it quiet. Don't tell anyone.
will bridge that gap.
Yeah.
But it is really difficult, because it's when people have done, like the students that we were working with, so many people were like, where can I learn this stuff? Like, where can I learn how to put it into a practical kind of format? And I think, there is a lot on Instagram. There's a lot of good things, and there's a lot of clickbait, I think is what I would say. Because even someone like me, who I love the positivity of working with people who are trying to achieve a goal, or I just find it a really energizing, positive environment to be in. But at the same time, not that I was going to quit, but I did not see anybody relatable in the space of what I was doing. I found it very masculine. I found it very aggressive with protein and and it's not what anybody eats. Like, no one that I've worked with is using things like, probably because of anti-doping for one, but no one's using protein powders, and it's because you can get all that stuff naturally in your diet. And how do you do it? How do you bridge that gap? I think it's starting from, like, you're in sports nutrition or you're in nutrition because, yes, there is a real scientific base level, but hopefully you're in it because you love food as well. And I think it's having an interest in food that will set you apart from everybody else in sports nutrition, because I'm guessing now it's, it is becoming very competitive. And I think it's having, not, you don't have to be a chef. You don't have to be a chef. I think it's looking at what do you love to eat? Because performance food is going to be different to everybody, but it's what makes you want to get up in the morning, and it's what helps you perform at your best. So if you start with yourself and looking at what you like to eat and what helps you, and also have the courage, I think is the word, to ask the people that you're working with, what do you like eating? What do you love eating? And or what has somebody cooked for you that you really love, or what do you find, helps you? Because food is a real, when you say food is a mood, it is, and it's a feeling. And I think every athlete will have been through, because they are also susceptible to what is going on in the media. And, I think James and I have spoken about this before, of if another person comes up to me and asks me what milk they should be having, I don't think I have the capacity to deal with it, because I'm like, unless you're chugging, a good, however, like, I think there's so much other things that you should be concentrating on to make sure that your nutrition is on point. And also context of food, having that, whatever it may be, chocolate bar or whatever it may be, unless you're doing that. And also within sports, the sports nutrition is very different to normal nutrition. And how you're trying to get that energy in, and when and how, and all those different things, it's very different to the
average sedentary Joe.
Yeah.
It is, because if the average Joe who's sat at the desk all the time is taking these gels or whatever, you're essentially, they're just putting extra calories and energy that they don't need into their diet. And the way in which things are demonized now or concentrated on, or, like, if I hear about blood glucose anymore, or trying to keep something like that even stationary, it's not normal. It's,
In fact, you'd be really worried for someone's health if their blood glucose was stable all the time. Like, if you don't see peaks and troughs, you've got a problem. You're probably dead.
Yeah. So I think it's having a good relationship with whoever you're working with. It's asking the questions of what do you like cooking? Is there, and if they are shying away from a certain food group, or they're saying that they don't want to eat something, like classic one, when Netflix brought out the
Game Changers.
Which was just horrific. I
swear that cost about 6 months of my working life, having to have conversations and writing stuff about why it was entirely scientifically wrong.
And also, like, from an ethical point of view, all those things that you were actually putting into, that they were actually putting into the body, they weren't natural. And then the space that takes up, and the crop space, just everything. If you actually dive into that, it was so unhealthy. But because veganism at that stage, was seen as this revolutionary health kind of phenomenon, and food has always been, like in fashion, like in everything, there's always going to be
Trends.
a new trend. And I
Yeah.
think it's really important from, sports nutrition, or like for me, like before, like something like veganism had actually taken off, I spent a month in LA, and I was like on a vegan food course, just because I wanted to see like why. I wanted to understand it. I wanted to understand, like, if I get a client like this who, even to implement some of those things, like adding more nuts, beans
Mm.
for a protein, like I wanted to understand it so that I could implement some of those strategies that I thought were really, really good and helpful into a daily diet. So I do think it's important to understand the concept of these new trends,
Yeah.
but also to look at it, and not just from an evidence base, but to try and understand why somebody might be implementing that into their
Yeah.
diet. Because, athletes, especially at the level that people are going to be dealing with, that they can be
Yeah.
very young, very impressionable. So just to understand, what why they're trying to do certain things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't
I think
go.
it's that case of most, most diets and most food choices, they're not inherently right or wrong.
No,
It,
no.
it's context, and it's also, well, what's your motive behind it? Like, you can have
Mhm.
exactly the same things and someone's doing it and it's because it's a fantastic choice for them, and the other person's doing it because they don't fully understand.
And yeah, and they're trying to, like, on the vegan food course, there was one guy and he was Hispanic. He was absolutely stacked, like really, really stacked. But I think it was 6 months previous, he had been in hospital with respiratory problems and was like not anything like he was
Yeah.
when he came to the course. And through his diet, because it wasn't, I think it was a lot of very processed foods that were naturally in his diet. He had totally, when I say totally, cured himself, but veganism was a thing that really worked for him
Right.
and his body. But for
Yeah.
me, I was like, I got to the end, and because I wanted to try it for the month that I was there, I was like, oh yeah, I'll give this a go. I did not want to see another avocado. I did not want to, like, I was like,
Needed
I
a steak. Yeah.
crave, yeah, I crave fish. And it's like one thing, like I just love fish. I love seafood. I really, 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 really craved that. But I wanted to understand it. But it is to just, nothing's right or wrong. And I think
Mm.
it's just to understand why or how something could help if you implement, like, I think on the, when we were teaching in the kitchen, like I wanted them to understand beans as a form of protein and how you can, add that into the diet, and in a really accessible way where things have already been pre-cooked for you. So again,
Mm.
it's from a jar, and just how delicious they can be, but it doesn't have to be the center part to everything, but it's a
Yeah.
useful it's a useful product to be able to add something like that when you do have, a an athlete that is vegetarian or vegan or not, like
Yeah.
the kind of nutritional benefits from things like beans that we would all kind of like benefit from. And I think as well, like, just talking about kind of like, if they don't agree with you at first, why that may be is because you're upping the fiber content of something and how your body's reacting to that. And just
Yeah.
to be able to kind of like, like if I had a whole jar of beautiful beans, like I think my boyfriend would make me move out, because like, that it's not a great after effect for me. But if I introduce those, like really like a low volume and slowly, how my body adapts to that over time, so that I can just have, you know I can just eat them from the jar if I feel like it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Can't go for a session not talking about Roger Federer as a tennis fan,
Yeah.
obviously. Um, just one, I won't go into too much because otherwise you'll lose me. But I remember when we were speaking at St Mary's, one of the things that came to light was that when you were working with him, he had a bad experience with food poisoning.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
can you touch on that a little bit and how that then put pressure on you as a chef, obviously having never worked with someone of that level before? And
yeah.
then also, can you just touch on how you're obviously working specifically and you're really focused on Roger Federer, but a lot of the time it was about the wider family as well. And often as nutritionists, we might
Mm.
negate the idea that, they are still living their lives with family, with friends, with and how that you're not going to necessarily make 5 different meals or recommend 5 different meals. So it has to fit that kind of social demographic too.
Yeah. So when I was working with Roger, one like his lovely wife Mirka was very I don't know what the word to use is.
Conscious?
Conscious. Yeah, she was very, very conscious of they wanted seafood the night before his tournament, and but he had food poisoning once before a tournament, and she was very conscious of how and what and why, and just to build that confidence with her of making sure you are sourcing the freshest ingredients, the cleanliness, how you're cooking, and understanding, people, like, even before a tournament, I wasn't just cooking for Roger, and he didn't just go to bed at 9 o'clock at night, and how you would think something like that works of that caliber person, because at the end of the day, when are they not on a tour?
Yeah.
When are they not training? When are they not working towards the next tournament? It's
Yeah.
constant. And so, there were other tennis players there, tennis players' partners, their wives, and then you had Roger. He only had one set of twins there, but you're cooking for the twins. There's the whole kind of, I don't want to say entourage, but
But it's
everybody
more than
else,
just him. Yeah.
that's supporting the support team that is working with them. So yeah, it's not just them. And another really key thing that I've probably said 1,000 times already is separating everything. So you
Yeah.
are giving people choice. If they don't eat asparagus or they don't eat whatever, it's their choice to take what they want. So it can be maybe you can do a lovely starter, but then set up the main as family style. So yeah, it's approaching it in a way of, instead of you having to do, you know, 6 different dishes, setting it up in a way in which everybody can eat the same dish, but they can choose what they want from that. Because also a lot of people, when you're moving around so much, it is control. Because
Yeah.
when you have somebody cooking for you, even though it does sound amazing, you want control over what you're eating, and also what you feel like eating.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's that
yeah,
choice. So much of their day is what they have to do, right? So anytime that you can introduce that idea of, well, what do you want to do? Still within the confines of
yeah,
supporting performance, right?
yeah, because like with AJ, he's got certain people that when he's doing a training camp will be with him 24/7. They're very used to that, but then you might get a different whoever coming through, and just, I want everybody to feel welcome. I don't want it to be like, well, no, you didn't tell me you were turning up, so you can't have anything. You want it to be that lovely environment. So you're like, oh, are you staying for lunch? Da 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 da. But again, when you separate the meal, if somebody is a vegan, or if somebody does just eat fish or whatever it may be, you've separated it so that they can feel welcome at any point. And, you know, we'd have that, he'd be sat there at lunchtime and the anti-doping agency, you know, would be testing him. And, you know, it's lovely to be able to offer if they want any food. So you just create a really positive, you know, welcoming environment so that nobody feels tension. It's a time where you can relax and you can enjoy. So I do think that comes from just making sure that one captain used to use like be prepared for the unexpected, and it is that just you know, because you can use leftovers and you can turn that into something else, or I can take it home with me. You know, nothing ever goes to waste. So yeah.
I think it's super powerful where you've identified how obviously food's so much more, but also those social interactions and opportunities. And I think that's something that probably is missing at the moment in industry a little bit in some sectors where there's not as much value on that kind of less quantifiable time with experts or with your multidisciplinary team. And I think you've shed such an important light on how important it is to mood, to culture, to all those things that are just vital for performance and success. And yeah, hopefully that is something that changes over time. But really interesting. I'm just really conscious of time because we've done 45 minutes at a blink of an eye. Is there any?
That's so interesting. I've probably got about another 3 hours worth of questions, but that was so interesting.
I think we're going to have to do a part 2 on this one eventually, and maybe a follow-up part maybe after the Olympics. I know Bryony is the busiest person in the world, and just from my end, I mean, seeing the evolution and from the proposal of you saying, James, I think I'm going to go into this to how it's just gone so positively. I mean, it's no doubt with what you just told us. Obviously, you've put your time, and you're obviously an expert in your field. But also, what does radiate really clearly is your passion, and also almost that kind of what's the right term? Kind of it's infectious, kind of almost love and enthusiasm that is for a culture would be so valuable. And I'm sure that the guys in Paris or wherever you're going to be set up are going to be loving that again. So hopefully it goes down. I'm sure it will be a major success in Paris. But yeah, thanks so much for your time. And we will watch this space with regards to that project that we may have discussed a little bit. I think there's massive scope here because I think there is a missing piece of the puzzle at the moment with regards to the amount of people that are very good, knowledgeable practitioners and maybe don't quite have the ability to make those little tweaks. So yeah, but thanks so much, Brian. Have a great summer.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. And just thank you also for just all the support that you've actually given me like on my journey, because it has been like invaluable to me too.
That's awesome. Thank you.